This is day one of what Court TV is calling the pregnant mistress murder trial. Jose Soto Escalera is currently facing the death penalty for allegedly taking the life of his former mistress, Tania Wise, who was also 8.5 months pregnant with his child. This is opening statement. This is Justin Cormier. He is representing the state. He starts off by stating, Eric, I have no other choice. I am going to lose everything. If my wife finds out something like that, oh my God, bro, I'm going to lose everything, bro. I have a spot. I have to find a spot where I'm going to dump her. I'll throw away all the clothes, or I'll burn them, or I'll wash them with Clorox. This is what he's stating are the words of Jose Soto Escalera on August 21st, 2018. He states that the evidence is going to show that the defendant had a huge problem and he needed to get rid of it. He had no other choice in his eyes. What was the problem? Tania Wise. On August 21st, Tania Wise was a mom. She was 38 weeks pregnant and she had no idea that the defendant was actually planning to take her life. He states that throughout the trial, we're going to learn that he actually worked for Waste Pro. He was a garbage truck driver and he worked with his nephew on the garbage truck. And he states that the reason they're going to talk about it throughout the trial is because they're going to hear how he planned out his murder because he did it on the garbage truck while driving around picking up trash during his route. He didn't know that while he's making these plans and speaking out loud, this entire conversation was recorded. The prosecutor states that there is video, there's audio, and that even though he's speaking in Spanish, everything is going to be translated. He shares that we are going to hear how he drives around on his trash route, trying to figure out where he's going to get rid of her body, where he is going to leave a 38-week pregnant Tania Wise for dead, how he's going to take her life. And then they talk about 2 days later. That's the date of the murder. So he plans it out. 2 days later, this transpires. He states it's a normal day for Jose. He's driving in his garbage truck and he's planning out what he's going to do because he cannot let his wife find out that he got another woman pregnant. And he's running out of time because she's already in the process of scheduling her C-section. The state makes it very clear that he did not care about taking a life, especially taking a life of someone that was carrying his child. The only thing he cared about was the fact that he was going to possibly lose everything if his wife found out that he had gotten someone pregnant. They state that he's talking casually to his nephew in the car saying, do you think I should choke her? Or would it be better if I just do a big blow and it's all over real quick? Then he tells him, you know what? She's not the type of person that anyone's even going to look for. They're not even going to look for her. They're not going to worry about her. And you know what? If they don't find anything within the first 48 hours, they're not going to find anything at all. The state makes it very clear that despite him planning all of this and discussing this over and over, how he's going to do it, he actually made some mistakes. And on August 23rd, he states that we're going to hear from the victim, Tania Wise. We're going to hear from her mother, Elizabeth Bedolla. She is helping Tania put her son to bed on the night of August 23rd, and then Tania leaves the house. The last time she saw her daughter alive was sometime around 8 p.m. that night. She doesn't know where her daughter is going. She thinks she's going out for a little bit. She didn't have a car. She didn't have a way to go anywhere. And he states that through the recordings, we're going to learn that his plan was to lure her to get out of the house and then take her somewhere to take her life. So that's August 23rd. And sure enough, on August 23rd, he states that he actually picks her up and takes her out to complete his plan. Following morning, Tania Wise, her life has already been taken, but they have a witness. Her name is Christine Gabin, and she is driving in St. Lucie County. And she's driving by and she sees something that stands out to her. She initially thinks it's trash, but then she decides to kind of reverse look and she realizes that in fact it was not trash and it was a body. She calls immediately 911. They go to respond, and that's where they take pictures. And that's initially how they find Tania. They share that when investigators arrive, her body is found completely face down. They do turn her over, and that's when they state that they saw some injuries to both her head and her neck, and also what appears to be vomit within her face. They take photographs and they start the process of, requesting the autopsy. However, on August 24th, that is the day that she is found, he's brought to the medical examiner's office, and the defendant is there riding in his garbage truck as if nothing has happened. He's talking to his nephew again about what happened, and he's telling him, yeah, I washed, everything, even though I had gloves on. I washed my hands with that brake cleaner. The nephew asked him, was there any blood? And he was like, yeah, there's blood. It was all over the clothes, but I got rid of it. They're not going to find any evidence. And again, he is talking in his truck and he has no idea that her body at that point had already been found. And he continues saying no one is going to look for her. No one is going to search for her at all. However, on the day that she's found, they start immediately working on the case, trying to figure out who knew her, who was spending time with her. I'm not going to go into how they described how she died because it's extremely graphic. But what I will say is that he made sure that she wouldn't survive. Not only her, but also their baby boy, Josiah, who was going to be born in a couple of weeks. They also shared that the day after her body is found, they have him come into the precinct, and he shows up in I believe it's a gray Dodge truck. And the thing is that there is a witness that comes forward. His name is William Mullen. He owned a pizza shop at the time, and he shares that he was driving on Russo Road in that area about 11:30 at night. He sees something that is odd to him. He sees that silverish truck, and he says it has some fog lights on it. It's just sitting on the side of the road. But then all of a sudden, the truck pulls up, turns its lights on, turns its lights off, drives off, and he thought that that was kind of weird. So the next day when he sees law enforcement there, he lets them know, hey, I saw this truck right out there where you guys actually found this body. So at this point, they realize it's starting to look more and more like Jose Soto, and they actually receive consent to search his truck. However, they also share that in his interview, when they're telling him how she passed, he acted extremely surprised. He said, I can't believe this happened. I hope you find who did this. I feel horrible for her family. So they asked him in that moment, well, how did you know her? And he said, well, she used to come over because her son plays with my son. At this point, they start to ask more questions, and they say, she was pregnant. Is there any reason for us to believe, or is there going to be anything that's going to show that you were in fact the father of this child? And he pretty much was like, no, I've never been with Tania Wise. So not only do they do a paternity test, but they also get a warrant for the truck. And sure enough, they state that when they go into his truck, they spray a chemical. And if there's blood inside, it's going to light up the truck. And they state that as they look inside of his truck, there's parts that are glowing. Evidence that's showing that, in fact, there was blood in the truck. They cut out the carpet to see what exactly, is the blood. They do DNA testing, and they share that during the trial, we're going to hear all about that DNA testing and how it resulted that he, in fact, was 99.99% the father of the child. Not only do they have that evidence, but they also share that due to the cell phone towers, it's going to show that he was, in fact, in the area of the crime scene when all of this happened. Now let's go into defense's opening statement, which took me out. Her name is Ashley Minton. She pretty much stated that Tania Wise was a dancer and an escort, and she brought unsavory characters into her life, and that she had told multiple people that she was pregnant by them, and that in fact law enforcement had to take multiple samples from multiple men to find out exactly who the father of the child was, including she shares the nephew of Jose Soto Escalera. She also shares that she was dropped off by some other man who was also told he was the father of the child. His name is Giovanni Alvarado. And that throughout the trial, we're going to learn that her client is not guilty. Now, the state's first witness, her name is Christine Gavin, and she shares that on August 24th of 2018, she was, going to see her granddaughters, and she decided to take a shortcut down Russo Road. She shares that while she's driving down, she's looking out the window, and she says that when she looks, she sees kind of some trash bags as if someone would have thrown trash out of their window. She drives to the end of the road, and she says she just kind of takes a step back and realizes that she didn't see trash. It was as if she had seen something else. She decided to, in fact, reverse to see specifically what she looked at. That is when she shares that when she turned around, she saw a body laying there. She immediately stopped. She called 911. It was around 10:50 in the morning. They asked her, how do you remember the time that you called 911? And she says it was because she was shocked. She was very upset. She sat there and waited for 911 to, in fact, arrive. And that also, when she called 911, she also looked at the phone to kind of remember what time it was. And she said that when she looked at it, it was around 10:54 a.m. The next witness is Deputy Joshua Gilkey from the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Department. He shares that on that day, he hears that a 911 call was reporting a body, and he was the one closest to the scene. He shares that when he arrived, he saw Christine Gavin, and she told him that she had seen what could possibly be a deceased body down the road, approximately 50 feet from where they were standing. And they asked him, did you approach the body? He said, yes. When I approached the body, the female appeared to be deceased at the time. So he immediately determined that this is an active crime scene. So they contacted the department to kind of let them know. Now, he shares that there was someone from the rescue team there, but they immediately noticed that she, in fact, was deceased. They couldn't do anything to save her life, so no one touched her. He did share that they took multiple photos and they turned those, into evidence. And the photos were essentially of Tania Wise laying face down in the area where they found her. Now, once he shared that he let his supervisor know what has been transpiring, the defense or the prosecution didn't have any more questions. The defense, on the other hand, asked him, do you remember that you stated that where the body was found was a wooded area? He said, yes, but it is partially wooded. And that was the question that they had for him. Let's go into the next witness. So the next witness is William Mullen, and he shares that back in 2018, he owned a pizzeria on Vero Beach, and he normally would take Russo Road as a shortcut to go to his home. They asked him, what happened on August 23rd of 2018 that caused you to call law enforcement? He shares that at 11 p.m., between 11 and 11:30 p.m., he was driving, and normally that road is completely empty. He shared that when he turned on to the road, he noticed a vehicle kind of about 100 to 150 yards off of the road. And that when he turned, instead of it having the normal lights on, it was kind of the low light. So the bottom part of the truck was the only thing that was on. He thought that it was suspicious. He stated that when he drove by, he noticed it was a silver truck. The windows were completely tinted and that the rims had chrome on them. Like it was a clean, nice truck, but that he couldn't understand why he wouldn't have all of the lights on. He kind of continued to watch him out of the rearview mirror because at this point the truck started leaving. And he noticed it stopped at the stop sign behind him and turned left. However, he didn't call police that night, even though he thought it was suspicious. He said, look, what I did is I continued watching the rearview mirror, didn't call police until the following day. That is when he's taking that route once again. He sees that the area is blocked off and that there was a tent that was, that had police there as if they were investigating a crime scene. He actually stated that where the tent was set up was exactly where he saw the truck. So he immediately parked and went and spoke with detectives and shared what he had seen the previous night. Now, the next witness is Tanya's mom. Her name is Elizabeth Botola. She shares that Tania was just 23 years old. She had an 8-year-old boy, and she was 8.5 months pregnant with her other son, who she had just decided to name Josiah Thomas. And she shares that she decided that on the day of her baby shower. She shared that they lived with her. They asked her who paid for her cell phone, and she said it was a man by the name of Bradley. Didn't know his last name, didn't remember if it was Rodriguez. They also shared that she lived down the street from Winn-Dixie. So at that night on August 23rd, she, along with Tania, were bathing the little boy because he was getting ready to go to school the next day, and they had kind of that bath time routine. She was going to get him dressed because Tania needed to go to the store to buy drinks for the boy because he needed it for the following day for lunch. That was the last time she saw her daughter. The prosecution asked her, were you aware that she actually had an appointment for the following week? And she said yes. She was actually going to schedule a C-section for the following Tuesday. That's all the questions the prosecution had. Then the defense comes in and they asked her, were you aware that your daughter had a relationship with a man by the name of Bradley Rodriguez Jr.? And she said yes. In fact, they lived with her for a short period of time. However, she kicked him out in March. And the reason they kicked him out is because he had gotten violent with Tania and she did not like the way he treated her. And so the defense is like, okay, so you saw him lay hands on her in front of you. And she says, I don't recall seeing him hit her at all. I just remember that I did not like the way he was treating my daughter. So apparently when they broke up, she started dating another guy. His name was Mark. And so she asked him, well, yeah, they started dating because they broke up and they kind of kept the friendship. She said, well, she kept the friendship with Bradley, but aren't you aware that Bradley would then threaten Tania as well? And she said, I know that at one point she mentioned it to me. And so they asked her, did you believe that Bradley was the father of her child? So at this point, they started, the prosecution comes in and they said it was speculation. She goes, okay, so around August 15th or 16th, did you take your daughter to Bradley Rodriguez's house to pick up baby clothes? She said yes. And you told law enforcement that he had actually been abusive with your daughter, right? And so at this point, prosecution's like, objection. She said, was Mr. Burke violent with your daughter? Correct. I think he was. I didn't see anything. They asked her, at this time, did your daughter start speaking with another gentleman who went by the nickname of Casino? And she says, I don't have any further questions at this point. The mom apparently was not aware of that person. And of course, the prosecution was fighting. Now, we are going into the associate medical examiner's testimony. This right here is Linda O'Neill, and she shares that in August of 2018, as I mentioned, she was at the time an associate medical examiner. She's currently retired. They did ask her, to kind of give the jury a description of her day-to-day. And she shares that basically in the state of Florida, the medical examiner is investigating certain deaths that fall under their jurisdiction. Most of them, they do autopsy examinations to essentially determine the cause and the manner of death. And they, of course, break down what an autopsy is so that the jury can understand the process. She does share that not only do they go through the entire body, kind of looking for the marks, etc. They also look at everything from the clothes that they are wearing, the jewelry that they are wearing, and they take pictures throughout the entire process. So she actually was involved on August of 25th of 2018 with the autopsy examination of Tania Wise. They asked her what type of materials did they review in order to form an opinion on the case. She said, well, obviously all of the findings of the medical examiner's office, any information that was given to her from law enforcement, lab findings, toxicology analysis, all of that they utilize. And then also she did say that they do complete x-ray examinations on the victim's body. So all of that together is going to determine the cause and the manner of her death. So they then submit the pictures into evidence. They share that the first picture is just when she arrived at the medical examiner's office. They continue to take pictures of her fangs. She shared that one of the pictures is what they consider an identification photograph. It is taken after the body is cleaned, so that way they can take a really good picture to be able to identify her. Also, they noticed that she had some red marks on her face, on her shoulders, chest, and arms. And so they asked her, why does she have those type of marks? And she shares that when you die, your blood stops moving in your body and it's going to settle to the dependent area by gravity. So if you're on your back, it's going to settle on your back. And if you're lying on your face down, then essentially it would settle towards that area, towards the front of the body. She did share also that after a period of time, even if you move the body, that blood or that lividity becomes fixed and cannot be moved, even though your body is being moved around. They then look at another picture, and in that picture, she shares that photograph is important because she shows a wound on the top of the head. So also on the back of the head, you can see that there is also another wound that is visible. She does share that in the pictures that the jury is looking, they're looking at her head already being shaved, and that they do that so they can get a better look at the margins of the wound and the tissue that's evolving in the wound. At this point, they do ask her, what do you think caused that type of wound? And she says, well, this type of wound is a blunt force trauma injury, meaning that it is a forceful blow to the body. And that blunt trauma injuries actually include bruises or contusions, and it could even include the scraping of the skin. She goes on to share that this particular laceration could have been caused by a very forceful blow with some type of heavy object. At this point, the prosecution asks, is it something that could have been caused by human hands, or did it require something heavier and more substantial? She responds, I cannot think of a way that this could have been caused by a human hand. And so when they, at this point ask her, well, when you talk about a heavy object, can you kind of share what kind of object? And at this point, the defense objected, stating that it calls for speculation. They continue talking about a completely different wound at this point, and they once again asked, based on your training and your experience, can you describe for the jury how much force was used to cause this particular wound? And she says, I would say it's extreme force. It's one forceful blow with the instrument that would be heavy enough to create this type of wound. And again, they're showing different pictures, and they ask, would that have automatically rendered Miss Wise unconscious, or could she have maintained at least some measure of consciousness after getting that type of blow? And she said she could have been unconscious. She could not have been. So at this point, the prosecutor asked, if we set aside all the other injuries, this particular injury, could it itself have caused the death? And she said, yes, this one in particular could have been the one that caused the death. Now, they continue talking about the different wounds that she had in her body, including puncture wounds. I'm not going to get into that. That was extremely graphic, and I can't even imagine the jury having to see that. The next topic that they went over was the baby. And she shares that when it comes to an autopsy examination, they have to open all of the cavities to kind of look inside. And that is where they would have gone over the womb. They opened and they took pictures of the womb opened. They saw that the baby was a full-term fetus as well. At the time of Josiah's death, he would have weighed 5 pounds and 22 ounces, and he would have measured 20 inches in length. That is insane. They say that all of his extremities were well formed. He was healthy from all accounts. Hands, feet, fingers, and toes are all felt well formed, as well as the base. They then ask her, did the baby die at the same time as the mom? And she shares no. In fact, that doesn't happen because the baby relies on the mother's blood flow. So if that blood flow stops, that baby doesn't die instantaneously, but because it's depleted, as it's depleted from oxygen and blood flow, it will die within a matter of minutes after the mother has passed. And they asked him, what was the cause of death? And of course, it was the fact that the mother had passed and he was he no longer had blood flow. At this point, the defense asked questions asking, did she know that at her appointment with her OBGYN on August 13th, the baby's was supposed to be at 31 weeks gestation? And she says, I don't recall that. So they went ahead and showed her kind of the OBGYN records. She said, okay, if, that record is showing the estimated delivery of the fetus was October 15th of 2018. Is that correct? And she said, well, I don't know exactly if that's correct. The delivery date is estimated at October 15th, according to the OBGYN records. They then go over the fact that Tania apparently had a high-risk condition called SVT, meaning that her heart can go into a rapid beat and it could be fatal for the mom and for the fetus. The examiner said, yes, she was aware of it. She was aware that that's why she was, in fact, a high risk, and that's why she most likely had a C-section with her first child. They then asked her one final question. Was there any independent injury to the fetus? And she stated no, that there was not. Then the state asked, the difference in gestational age of the child, does that affect the cause of death for the child? She said no. And that was the end of the medical examiner. Now, the next witness is Dr. Rule Stossel, who was her OBGYN. He shares that her doctor actually referred her to him because she had a history of SVT. He shares that SVT simply means that the heart rate speeds up suddenly. And because it's happening so fast, the blood flow patterns change, which in turn can cause the patient to lose consciousness and even have chest pains. So by her having SVT, that would automatically qualify her pregnancy as a high-risk pregnancy. They went to ask him, did she have regular office visits? Did she miss any appointments? Yes, she had regular office visits. She did not miss any appointments. And one of the things that he does in his particular office is the constant monitoring. So they're constantly having sonograms to ensure everything is going well. They did ask him, was there any history of drug use or evidence of any current drug use or anything like that? He stated no. He stated that when she was transferred over, they had to wait for the doctor to submit everything. But once they got the records, they realized that there were a few panels that were not completed that she should have had done, and that he immediately handled those and requested them. They also shared that she had 5 ultrasounds. The initial ultrasound was to complete the fetal anatomy, check on the base growth rate, and then serial ultrasounds thereafter to make sure they monitor the fetal growth rate, making sure that that pregnancy remains healthy. Her first ultrasound with him was May 17th of 2018. At the time, she was 18 weeks and 3 days. They asked, as far as your opinion, were there any issues of her health or even the baby's health at that time? He said, she was clinically stable. She did have intermittent tachycardia, but there was nothing to be concerned about. They didn't see anything that would put the baby at high risk, or even the baby didn't have also any type of birth defects or abnormalities. So they continued going over the fact that she continued going every single month, and every time she went, they continued doing the sonograms and ensuring that the baby, in fact, did not have any type of abnormalities or birth defects. So they went ahead and confirmed that the baby, throughout the entire time that he was monitoring that pregnancy, that baby was healthy. There were no issues or concerns about its development. The last ultrasound would be on August 13th of 2018. They determined, according to the ultrasound, the baby was 31 weeks. The status of the baby's health, everything was normal fetal movements. They assessed the baby to make sure that the fetal movements were normal breathing movements, fetal tone was appropriate. They also stated that baby Josiah even got a score 8 out of 8, stating that, his profile was a great score. Everything was going well. She had a healthy baby in her womb. The defense then asked if he ever received the pending cardiology report, and he shares that because of her insurance, there was a delay in him receiving that from the physician that she was referred. and they eventually turned it over. They were able to refer her to a cardiologist. And again, they asked him, did you ever get the report back? And he said, not that he's aware of. Now, at this point, the prosecution stands right back up and says, I know you testified at the beginning, but were there any indications that Tania Wise was using any drugs, anything like that? And he says, no, not at all. Let's go into the next witness. The next witness is Kenneth Barron. He was actually a colleague of Jose Soto Escalera. He'd known him for years prior to working with him. They asked him, was he a friend? Was he a colleague? He was like, it was kind of in between. Like, we talked, but he was still like a coworker. So they asked him if where her body was found was that part of Jose's route when it came to the garbage truck, and he said yes. They also asked him what happened in the summer of 2018, and he said that unexpectedly, Jose went up to him and asked him for a pew. I'm not going to say the word just in case I get banned. He said, was that strange? Like, that he would come up to you? He was like, yes, because I have them, but they're in my name. And I asked him, like, what are you looking for, a big one? Are you looking for a small one? I'm not understanding. He was like, no, something small, but as if something off record, something off the street. And he was like, all of mine are registered. I have them all registered. I don't sell any type of weapons off the street. That he thought it was weird. So he asked him why. And then he was like, no, I'm just curious. He also shared that he was confused as to why he was coming to him because he owns multiple pews in his own name. Why would he come to him to get one? So at this point, the defense asked him, didn't he tell you that this was actually for his cousin and not for him? And he told me that after I started asking him multiple questions as to why he would need something like that, especially something that's what's considered, I guess, a ghost. She then said, did you know his wife as well, Jose's wife? And he goes, well, I know her because apparently she was a supervisor at the company where they worked, where they were garbage truck drivers. And she said, isn't he or isn't she the reason that you got fired? He was like, no, she's not the main reason. So the defense team stated, didn't you tell police that she was the reason why you got terminated? And he said, no, I shared that she is part of the reason, but she didn't have the final decision. She didn't really have the final say. And that was all the defense team had to say. Let's go into the next witness. The next witness is Janine Hiller. She is the crime scene investigator. She shares that through all of her experience, all of her certifications, this allows her to be qualified to be a crime scene investigator and a late print examiner. So she shares that upon the arrival, one of the things that they just try to collect as much evidence as possible. They put cones around the areas where they think matters, that there's certain details that they need to pick up. They did share this picture. Before I show it, trigger warning, this is her, Tania Wise, face down. They took multiple pictures of her. That is what they submitted into evidence. They also took pictures of markings of a truck. They took pictures of different t-shirts, things that they found. They didn't know if it had anything to do with the case or not, but she shares that when you go, you're trying to collect as much evidence as possible, so you have to take everything seriously. They did share that in the picture, you can see her in the ditch area. They stated that when they moved her body, that is when they could see an injury to the right side of the neck. They also have pictures where she's kind of holding onto something. Keep in mind, she did not have any type of defensive wounds at all. They also shared that where she was laying was consistent, or where the victim's face was consistent with bodily fluid that was consistent with vomit. They asked her, like, is it normal when you go to these crime scenes that there's fluids? And she goes, yes, there's always, majority of the crime scenes have all types of fluids that she has had to collect in the past. So vomit is something that they do see often. She also shared that her clothing was wet, especially her top, her face, and her hair were very wet. She was kind of in the ditch that was wet, so they were kind of assuming that is why her body and her clothes were wet, especially on her head and her face. They continue talking about the fact they had to take pictures of everything, and they made sure that when they called the person that's coming to pick up the body, they want to make sure they put a white sheet just to be able to pick up anything extra that may be on the face will automatically go onto that white sheet. She also shares that she was present in the autopsy of Tania Wise, and one of the things that they do is that they swab different parts to make sure she was also not a victim of assault. They also went over multiple warrants. So the first warrant was at 2613, I believe, Cactus Circle, and they shared that they were there just to document, just to take pictures and collect evidence. They collected evidence and DNA from a gentleman by the name of Eric Alvarado. They then had another warrant for a Dodge Ram on September 24th of 2018 that she went again just to take pictures. They were searching for any type of DNA. Keep in mind that they sprayed everything to see if there was any presence of blood, and we know that there was, and what they do is that they cut it out to then test the DNA. She shares that they had a warrant for a Dodge Ram on September 24th. When they arrived, the first thing that they do is take pictures. They take pictures of the vehicle in the front, driver's seat, the back. They document the condition of the vehicle on the inside as well as the outside. They also share that they utilize what's called a blue star. And blue star, what it does is that they spray it inside of the vehicle, and it detects if there is any blood in the carpet, in the seats, anywhere inside of the vehicle. Now, she shares specifically that they have to work in the dark because this particular chemical creates like a luminescence reaction. So at this point, they spray it to see if they can find blood. And if there is blood, it'll emit a light for them to see and visualize. And they take pictures. They have cameras set up when they're doing all of this, spraying and detecting. And then they cut out the pieces that essentially have the blood spots in the vehicles. Now, once they do that, they actually swab it as well just to test any type of DNA, also to confirm if the blood in fact is human or not. She shares that anywhere in the vehicle where they had a reaction to the blue star, they would either collect or cut it out or swab it. So in this particular, they had items such as the seatbelt, the sun visor that they removed, as well as they swabbed the tarp of the armrest. She shares that they did this after they have gotten reactions from the blue star spray. They then go over all of the pictures being submitted to evidence, and one of the pictures that they do show is the interior of the vehicle, and they share that, as you can see, the luminescent blue, that is reaction to the blue star, just to show that there in fact is blood. Again, this is another picture, and here is depicting again that driver's side area of the Dodge Ram where they detected blood. So she shares that because of where the carpet showed that blue star kind of luminescent, they had to pull that completely out. She then shares they remove the seat cover exactly where they also saw blood essentially being depicted. And then there was also blood on the driver's door. For that, they don't, of course, rip anything out. They will just swab and kind of check to see what the DNA is. They then also show pictures showing that there was also that blue luminescent on the seatbelt. Once they removed that cover to the driver's seat, they found some more as well. So that was in September. However, in January, they go back to the pickup truck to detect or to collect additional evidence, including tire impressions. Keep in mind that where they found her, there were truck impressions around the ditch. And also a witness had come forward saying that they saw a big silver truck the night before. So she shares that they took tire comparisons to compare it to the images that they had from when they discovered her body. Now it's the defense's turn to question her. They immediately ask if the blue star reacts with hemoglobin or the iron. And hemoglobin, she says, yes, the hemoglobin can be present in other substances in the body other than blood. She said, not to my knowledge. So they asked her specifically, you can have blood in your, fluid. She says, yes, you could. However, what you're stating is if there was any type of intercourse, could it cause to have blood in those fluids? She says, yes. So likewise, you can have blood that contains hemoglobin in your saliva as well. If you have a wound, if you have periodontal disease, would that essentially cause blood to be recognized in the vehicle, etc.? She goes, yes, if there's any type of injury. They then asked her when was the truck collected and how long did it remain at the sheriff's office before they did all of this. And she said that the truck was actually collected on August 27th, and they did not go through the vehicle, I believe, until September. That was all the questions they had for her. The next witness is Mark Chapman. He's a firearms examiner and a tire impression expert. He explains how they essentially study these tire impressions. He shares that they have test impressions from vehicle tires. What they do is put the tires on a cardboard, photograph it to make it life size. And at this point, utilizing photo editing software, it allows them to create how many inches are in between each impression. Also, they look for specific characteristics to either include unknown impressions or even exclude it if they have an example of an impression that they want to compare. He shares that with tire characteristics, they would be the width of the tire, the number of the ridges and the grooves. So ridges is the part of the tire where the tread element exists in the space between the groove. He says some tires may have 4 ridges, other have 3 ridges. The width of the tire also changes. So he received the impressions from the Dodge Ram and then another pair of impressions from the scene. However, they were able to exclude the truck or the impressions that were left on the scene. He stated that it in fact was not the Dodge Ram's impressions. The next witness is Kayla Lim. She's actually the crime scene supervisor on August 25th of 2018. She did provide assistance to another crime scene investigator. She stated that she assisted another crime scene investigator with processing the silver Dodge truck for DNA. They asked her where was it processed. She said the sheriff's office parking lot. Keep in mind, they already had it there since the prior month. They use a sterile swab like Q-tips. She said the package is open, you're wearing gloves. Then you use a sterile drop of water, put 1 drop into the sterile tip. That's when they swab. Again, this was located in the parking lot. They also took multiple photographs. Then they state that the reason they take all of these photographs, that it assists them with processing the crime scene, reminding yourself what the vehicle looked like on that particular day as you're going through all of the evidence. She then shares that as the truck is being processed or taking pictures, they go ahead and they swab all of the doors. They did state that metal reacts to the blue star. So if there is any blood, it is going to light up also. Also, they went ahead and took pictures of a car jack, but that was pretty much her only involvement. She stayed with them processing the crime scene and then again until January of 2019 before she moved on to another case. The next witness is Christopher Newman. He is a detective from the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office. He shares that when you get assigned to a case, you get called out to the scene where there's several detectives there and you never know who's going to be chosen as the lead detective. So he arrives and it was on Russo Road as he shared. When he arrives, he states that, you kind of get an overall sense of what's going on in the crime scene. You start sending out the text to do interviews with any witnesses that you may have been made aware of. You want to talk to people about the case. And first and foremost, they learned that Tania Wise was the victim and that she had a boyfriend. They learned that the boyfriend, his name was Bradley Rodriguez. They asked him, was there another male involved? At the time, he goes, yes, there was another male by the name of Mark Burke. And then there was another boyfriend that she had kind of in between dating Mr. Rodriguez, which was Giovanni Alvarado. He was supposed to be somebody that she knew and that she would talk to often. Then they learn about the existence of Eric Alvarado. Eric Alvarado is in fact Jose Soto Escalera's cousin or nephew. So again, they talk about conducting an interview at the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office back in 2018. They went ahead and recorded the interview as well.
Did you ever keep in touch with Tanya?
No, sir.
No?
The only time we talked was when her son came over our house, because I have a 9-year-old, and she used to drop him off, and he stayed with us for the weekend. That was the only...
So you would watch her kids sometimes?
Yeah, because he come hang out with my son, so, we take him for the weekend, and then she would come back and pick him up.
Remember her son's name?
Jamar.
So you just watch him every weekend, once in a while, or?
It went, in the beginning, she was bringing him, and then it just stopped. I don't know.
How was she in touch with you for bringing him over?
She would call, or Yeah, she would call my phone or let Bradley know or whatever.
How would you describe Tanya? Like if you had to describe her to somebody, like personality-wise, who she is, what would you say?
She was pretty mellow, I could say, but kind of crazy. I don't know. Talking ghetto, or ghetto talk.
Did she
She used to strip. That's what it was. She was a stripper or something like that. I never saw her, so I don't. I just knew about what people say.
Where did do you know where she used to strip at?
No, sir.
As you can see, Jose Soto Escalera was being interviewed by police, and the entire time he maintained that he only knew Tanya through Bradley, who was his nephew, who was dating Tanya at the time, that he only saw Tanya if she was dropping off their son or her son, so that her son could play with his son because they were around the same age. Outside of that, they never had a relationship and they never spoke. He then shares that he's been married for 2 years, has 4 boys with 3 different moms. The boys are 25, 24, 17, and a 9-year-old. He shares that he started at a very young age having kids. They then ask him, like, did she talk about anyone when she would come over their house? And he's like, no. And they asked him, when was the last time you spoke to her? Because keep in mind that anytime she was going to drop off her son, she would call him or the boyfriend would coordinate, the alleged boyfriend, which is the nephew. And he says, well, I think the last time I talked to Tanya was either Wednesday or Tuesday because she was supposed to bring her son Jamar on Friday. He says that when she called him, it was around 8 p.m. Thursday night, and that it was quick, pretty much saying, are you guys going to be home? Jamar wants to come over. And then he was like, yeah, that's cool. That's fine. No issues. He says it wasn't even a 5-minute call, but she never showed up. It seems that in that moment, the police had more information and they knew that he was lying. So they told him, look, we get sometimes when you're married, you want to keep things quiet and you don't want, for example, us to share with your wife anything. But this is us talking right now. A lot of men will come and they won't tell us things for fear of their wife getting jealous. But just know that whatever we talk about here, we're not going to share with your wife. So anyways, they said, whether it's that the woman gets jealous, whatever it may be, they're not telling the whole truth. And he goes, no, I hear you. He said, okay, did you have any other involvement with her other than watching her kid? No, nothing. She would just bring the son over and whenever like Bradley was with us, she would hang out with us. That's it. They then asked him where he was the night that she went missing or was murdered. And he said, that night he was fixing a battery on a motorcycle. They asked him whose, motorcycle was. He said his friend's. They then said, is there a chance that you were the father of the child? And he said, absolutely no chance. We got nothing to do with that. Absolutely positive. If I was to do something like that, I would take responsibility for it, just like I've done it with all 4 of my boys. Keep in mind, he is the father of the child. They then asked him additional questions, asking him if he'd be interested in getting a DNA test. He said he doesn't care. They asked him how close was he with his friends at work. He said, I just went to work, came back. And he said, I didn't have a relationship with a lot of the employees because his wife was a supervisor and didn't want him to be shown any type of favoritism. He drives a Dodge truck. They asked him, would he ever lend it to anyone? Has he ever lent it to anyone? He said, no, he has not. He then shares also that there would be no opportunity because his wife is constantly texting him, calling him, asking when he's going to get home, where is he at? And they asked him, okay, well, shit's about to get real is exactly what they said. Tanya is dead. He said, what do you mean? He goes, we found her deceased on Friday and we have been interviewing everyone that has been in contact with her. We are trying to iron out everyone's stories because there's a lot of things flying around. People are saying a lot of stuff about other people and he acted completely shocked. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Just completely shocked. They then reiterate, we're having a conversation, don't try to hide things from us, and he was like, no, I have nothing to say. I told my nephew to not fall in love with a stripper because I know for a fact that, she was pregnant by him, but she was using other men. That's all that she does. And I used to try to tell him, and unfortunately he had to learn the hard way. He also shared with them that he was trying to get his life right, that he ain't got nothing to do with anything like that. They were going to church. He's been through a lot of stuff and everything is finally going well in his life, that he would not even give anyone time of day to kind of get involved in his relationships, etc. What was interesting is that all of a sudden he starts remembering that she talked to a lot of dudes, pretty much, giving him names now. Also saying that, that they had gone out, all of them together. And they even asked him, like, did you loan your truck to her? No, absolutely. Has she been inside your truck? He said a long time ago when me and my wife went to Cheddar's, that was the day that this guy beat the crap out of her. So it was all three of us that went out. She has not been in my car since March. And they're like, okay, you understand, you watch TV and you understand how DNA works. And he was like, yeah, I understand. They then reiterate that they are going to take DNA from the baby during the autopsy because the baby is also deceased, and that they don't want there to be any other or any type of surprises. So they're pretty much giving him an opportunity to confess and be like, yes, I'm the child's father. They then start asking him, had he ever been to the house? And he was like, oh, well, actually, there was one time where Bradley and her had a scuffle, so I had to give her a ride to her brother's job, because apparently the brother was the one that came forward and said that there was information where, I don't know if he told her, but pretty much that she was being stalked by Bradley, which is the nephew, and that he had seen the vehicle. And he said, how would I know that? I was never around there. He then calls his wife as they step out to go get the swabs and tells her, hey, they got me here. They're interrogating me. They're doing a DNA test. I ain't got nothing to do with this. I'm just being honest. Apparently Tania's dead. So they come back, they do the swab. And while he's doing the swab, he starts talking, because he talks a lot. And he says something like Bradley got arrested, to give them a heads up. Then he tries to continue giving them information, saying that he was called at 1:25 in the morning by specifically Bradley's mom, again, to let them know that Bradley got arrested and that they have his fingerprint, etc. They were aware of all of that at that moment. But he did say that the reason he got arrested had to do with Tania. And keep in mind, Bradley is supposed to be his nephew. At this point, they continue talking to him. They continue asking him again, kind of reiterating, so she's never been in your truck? And he's like, no, remember, like, she was in my truck that time. They're asking if they can go ahead and go through the truck. And just sharing, look, we're going to have to go through a lot of people because of the amount of conversations and things that people are saying. So we want to make sure that we eliminate you as quickly as we possibly can. Now, what's interesting is that they confront him because he initially stated that he didn't really know her, didn't really talk to her. And they said, well, when we pulled up her Facebook, it shows that you're a friend. And he's like, what? How is that even possible? And he pretty much blamed it on his child getting on the phone. He's like, I don't even follow her. I didn't even know that she was on my Facebook until you just mentioned it. So again, they tell him, okay, so again, you've never had any type of relationship with her. You guys ever talk dirty or anything like that? Nothing like that. He said, she's ghetto because she talks about how she does this and that, but she's never tried anything with me. They go ahead and they thank him, and they say, we appreciate that you're cooperating with us. And he says, one thing that I learned is about the truth. I've been through a lot of shit, and I learned that the easiest thing to do is to tell the truth. This man had a whole conversation with them talking about that when he got with his wife, he had a credit score of 366 because he was getting paid under the table. But his wife is real professional, was like, no, we got to buy a house. So now his credit is 766. And, him and his wife and the girl were never friends because she was a stripper and his wife was too professional for that. At this point, he turns over his phone, etc. And that is the end of day 1. We will continue in day 2, which I imagine will continue with his interview with police. Talk to you soon.